Hi, good evening everyone, and welcome to tonight's In Search of Purpose talk. This, as our regular audience will realize, and for those of you who are new, big welcome. This is in fact our 26th In Search of Purpose talk. My name is Darren. I'm usually your MC. I'll be your guest host tonight as well, and I'm looking forward very much to it. As you know, the In Search of Purpose talk is a series where we invite speakers, whether overseas or from Singapore, who have inspiring life stories or experiences to share, hopefully to motivate young adults and young people, both in the Central Singapore district as well as outside, to themselves lead inspiring stories and to positively affect others. Now, this is the first online In Search of Purpose that we've had, so it's just not a new experience for you, it's a new experience for me as well, and I hope we enjoy it together. I hope that all of you are safely sheltering in place. And although it's a different environment than we had before, nothing changes. We're here to listen to our guests speak and also to share her experiences and ask her questions. Now, for those of you who've missed our first 25 In Search of Purpose talks or unable to make it for future sessions, the talk series is available online on our YouTube channel, In Search of Purpose Talks, and you will be able to see this talk as well at a later time. But please do enjoy our earlier episodes. The other thing that I would highlight is that In Search of Purpose is just one of the 52 programs that Central Singapore CDC runs. If you want to find out more, you're already on our Facebook page. Please do look at the programs that we run. I think you'll find them very meaningful. All right, now that we've gotten the administrative matters out of the way, this is the first time that I'm not asking people to silence their handphones and beeping devices. In fact, please keep your volume on, because this is where I introduce our speaker. Now, we're very honored to have with us Ms. Nichol, co-founder of The Food Bank Singapore, to share her story with us. A very special guest we have tonight. Please give it up for Ms. Nichol.
Hi everyone. Yes, so firstly, thank you for having me on this evening. I am going to present you some slides to share a little bit more about my story. So that's why the header today on my presentation is what's my story, right? So all of you are really listening in because you genuinely want to know, so what's behind her story. So I would like to start off by saying, firstly, a lot of us who actually attend these talks, right, whether it's at TED Talks or any of seminars and presentations, you always see the speaker as someone like, oh, likely she's very successful, which is why she has the time and the money to do charity work, and a whole host of things. But today I'd like to share with you my journey on the road that I've taken over the last 42 years. And if I can just put it out there, I will welcome any questions that you may have. Nothing is out of bounds, so to say, and so it makes life easier for Darren as well when I help him to answer the questions that will go his way. And so firstly, thank you for all of you, for logging in. A lot of us have been cooped up at home, but not myself, because I'm in the essential business. So I've actually been going to work every single day. So whether it's for the food distribution or from the food bank's perspective, I would like to say that food is pivotal to my life. And actually it has taken on quite an interesting role. And I would like to start by, sharing some slides with you. So firstly, if you ask me what's the purpose in my life, maybe it's to correct the wrong that was already made from the time that I was born. So when I say that, it's because if you notice my Nichol, it's not your traditional spelling. It's usually Nicole. But my late daddy, who I love to bits, have made the mistake from birth that in a rush, I guess he even spelt my name wrongly. And I've lived with this error for all my life. But it's interesting because a lot of people who have never met me before, they think that I'm a male. And I guess it was just a prelude for my younger brother, who actually came 18 months later. So my dad just did the lazy thing by adding an AS at the end. And that's how we got to be, and maybe that also explains the closeness that I have with the only sibling that I have, which is my brother. So anyway, Nichol, I have to bring attention to my Chinese name as well. And so the meaning behind it really is, I guess when my parents gave me the name, is that I was out to do something greater than who I am. And for those of you out there who can read Chinese, the ting is something that's very feminine. So the wei is something that's very masculine. So together with the error in my English name, I have become a crossbreed between female and male, so which is why I have quite a strong personality. So for anybody who is, expecting your first child and thinking what name to name, so remember, the name makes all the impact on that little one, okay? Yeah, and with that, this is who I was when I was born, right? So there's only 2 of us because it was the Stop at 2 campaign. I think my parents would have loved to have a lot more children, but they were quite worried that a lot of them wouldn't get into good schools, so they decided to be the good citizen and stopped at 2. So it's just me and my brother from very young. And on this note, I'd like to say that maybe some of you would know or would not know, if you have read my story somewhere before, that food played a very big role. And it actually started because I was always bigger built than other girls. And at the age of like 5 years old, if any of you are old enough to remember, but there was this Nestle commercial about a ballerina, and I will sing a little bit right now. It goes like, "You're my best little girl, you're my pride and my joy." And then it goes, showing this perfect little girl in that slender body in a ballerina outfit, and that depicted how I wanted to be, this perfect little girl, like beautiful and graceful and all that. But because I was bigger built than a lot of girls out there, every Chinese New Year I was asked this question. Hey, did you steal your brother's food? They always tend to compare. And so therefore, since I was 5 years old, and after being rejected from a very famous ballet school, yeah, I wouldn't name names, but they actually told me and my mom off that, hey, I'm sorry, but your daughter is too fat to be a ballerina. And I'm just so thankful that I have parents that love me for who I am, regardless. And I wasn't even obese, okay? I was just much bigger built, but they just felt that, the teacher felt that I couldn't fit into a leotard, perfectly, for example. And so when I mentioned that, it's because that actually led me to being very particular about how I look. And I have stumbled upon eating disorder since I was 11 years old. But the seed was planted from that age when you see in the photographs right now. So that the picture in the middle is actually me in my nursery uniform. Please don't ask me why the skirt is so short, okay? I'm going to ask my parents that. But it's really because I think I was really taller than a lot of the kids out there. And the picture on the right is actually me and my brother, and we are only 18 months apart, but you can see he was this fussy little boy, and so he wasn't growing that well. And boys develop later. So a lot of people are asking, how come, your brother is so much tinier than you are? And this set the tone for me to get on a diet. It's quite amazing. So food was pivotal to that, right? So now I will show you. And as I was growing up, I was very lucky because I attended a very good school. I was in a bilingual SAP school for 10 years. So yes, I'm effectively bilingual, although I look like a potato on the outside, but I'm really not. The school actually cultivated a lot of sense of responsibility in me. So today's mission, or the topic of today, is like, what's my story? And importantly, in search of purpose, right? So it was actually my late grandmother who actually told me from when I was very young age, why are you always so kaypoh? So I'll explain to you why I'm very capable. Because since I was like 5 years old, I've also wanted to be the class leader. I've always led a very active life, whether it's in terms of a student leader or helping the teachers, helping my classmates and all that. And all the way since primary school, I've taken on leadership positions, simply because I was capable. So I was the head prefect in primary school. I was the head prefect in secondary school. I was the head counselor in my college years. And subsequently, when I went to NUS, I was the vice president of the Students' Union. And now, actually, everyone is asking me, when are you going to join politics, right? So not so soon, okay? So you won't be seeing my face anytime, okay? So, but anyway, being the capo nature that I was, I've always taken a very active approach. So I mentioned about eating disorder earlier on, and I have to mention this photo here when I mentioned Bananarama days. That was the photo when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and that was really the onset of my eating disorder, because I was very aware, and that was when all the tabloids came about as well. And I actually picked up wrong things from what the tabloids were showing, right? Like they were actually telling us like how not to become anorexic or how not to become bulimic. But when I read the magazines, I basically picked up all the wrong things. But a lot of you may not know, an eating disorder is really not about looking good. It's a mental illness. And from a young age, I've also been quite a perfectionist. So I try my best to, fulfill everything, every role, every responsibility. And by having this added weight of an eating disorder, I've also become a control freak through my life. It's just that in other areas, maybe people might abuse alcohol or, they might be a gambler. But for anybody who has an eating disorder, for those of you who are interested to know, it's just that we use food as a way of controlling things. For myself, it was interesting. I was in a top girls' school, but I've never been in a top class. So I've always been at the bottom of a top school. So you can imagine how stressful it is. I also have my ex-principal to thank, because from early on, she actually told my mom when I was like 8 years old, right? And she said, hey, Catherine, let me share with you, your daughter's grades will likely not be so good, but she has a calling in life. So from 8, 9 years old, I don't know what my principal saw in me, but she actually said that she likely will have another purpose in life. But it's not about fulfilling like all A1s, but it's about doing something special. And so I guess from very young, I had nurturing parents, I had great teachers, and I also had a principal that saw something in me, and including my grandma as well. And so now, when I got to secondary school, I was actively involved. I was in a softball school team. I was the AVA vice president. For those of you who are really young, you'll be wondering what's AVA, right? So like the media that today, so we were the times, when we went to the hall and connected the mics and tried to learn about photography. There was no mobile phones with cameras back then, and that was the AVA club was all about. Okay, so I had a diversified interest. I love to cook. It was part of the eating disorder that I have as well. But I have to mention my secondary school days, because the photo at the bottom, it's my dad, my brother. That was my graduation photo. As you can see, that was at the peak of how heavy I was. And yes, all of us had to wear ugly white dresses because it was a convent school, so we had to, at least knee length and all that. And I was a very big child, so I was like, how to fit it nicely into a dress, right? So my mom had to tailor make something for me. And at this point, I also wanted to share that, like all of you know, I actually came from a food business, right? So my grandfather came from Swatow, China in 1939. After his first wife passed away, and he brought his younger daughter with him. So in survival, before World War II, he was, he came all the way to Singapore on a junk boat, trying to, in search for a better living, right? So subsequently, he met my grandma, and they had 9 children, and they were all brought up in a shop house. And don't tell me how, no family planning, nothing, but it was 3 boys, 3 girls, 3 boys, all 1 year apart, perfectly healthy, and all brought up in this tiny little shop house. And so my grandfather actually started the business by serving all the roadside hawkers, and back in the day, there was no SFA or anything. And in the 60s, when the hotel started booming in Singapore, my older uncles actually took over the business, and they started diversifying into Western food ingredients, which is something that we carry right now. And where was my dad? My dad was the second youngest of this family of 9. So at age 15, he actually dropped out of school. My dad, till today, is one of the most amazing entrepreneurial men that I've never met. My biggest regret in life is really not being in time to write a book about him. So in the 80s, when Singapore was, in the booming stages, it's beginning to open up as a free port and all that, my dad was one of the entrepreneurial people who actually dabbled in all kinds of business. So he left the food business to be ran by my uncles. At that point, my grandfather has also passed on already. And so he started a trading company. So what did he do? We did everything from opening the first duty-free shop in Maldives, we had a perfume trading business in Switzerland. We did movie making. So my dad actually did Hong Kong movies back in the day when EDB was opening their doors. We were building bungalows. We had more than 25 offices all around the world. And I was having a very comfortable upbringing, right? Very comfortable life. And if those of you who are old enough to remember, in 1997, we were basically hit by the biggest Asian currency crisis. So other than the oil crisis in the 1980s, the next crisis that hit us and it hit Singapore is basically in 1997, when for the first time the whole of Asia was hit by this currency crisis. And my dad was affected as well. So imagine building an empire, and that time I was like 16, 17 years old. So at that point in time, the entire empire the revenue was about 250 million US dollars, which in today's terms is going to be about $1 billion. Yeah, our head office was actually in Orchard Road. Yeah, and so in '97, what happened was my dad became bankrupt. We actually lost every single business that we had. So I was there when the banks came to seize the house. It's exactly like what you see on TV. Someone comes with a piece of paper and a guard, and they give you 30 minutes to pack whatever you have. So coming from a very comfortable upbringing and being there by my parents' side when this happened, I'm just very thankful for one thing. And I think for any of you out there who's searching your purpose, is that my parents never brought me up spoiled. They did pamper us, but we were never spoiled. So when that happened, I just stood by my dad and told my daddy, like, do what you need to, as long as we have a roof over our heads, that's good enough. So we lost our family home. I was there when my mom's Mercedes was towed away. And being a very impressionable 17, 18-year-old person, I've realized from very early on that I cannot take anything for granted. So that was in college, and when I entered university, right? Okay, so firstly, I have to share these slides, my college days. So my first boyfriend is one of those three guys, and I won't tell you who it is, but that was my days in CJC. And those were interesting days, paired with the bankruptcy, and being first time in a co-ed school. Those were interesting days. And then I went to NUS. Okay, it was a tough time, and that was the first time I felt like I had to sacrifice because of what happened to my father. My brother, whose Chinese was terrible, and if he's watching this, and he knows it for sure, he was packed off to a boarding school when he was 15. So my mom, being one of those kiasu Chinese mothers, right? He already packed him off because in fear of not doing well for O-levels. At 15, he was packed off to Australia for boarding school, and so he was determined to finish his studies overseas. But I was good enough to continue my studies in Singapore, and so my dad, who said that, hey girl, I cannot afford to send you to Switzerland to study hospitality, which was what I wanted to do. He said, can you please study in Singapore? Because I needed to use my CPF money to pay for your fees. So I felt for the first time that being the eldest, and the sister and the daughter of the family, I had to take on this responsibility to sacrifice my own dreams. My grades were not good enough to enter business school. So I just did arts, I studied economics. Other than my dad using his CPF to pay for my school fees, I basically earned my own allowance by working part-time. So for anybody that knew me in secondary school, I was this flashy girl, who was changing Swatch watches every day simply because my dad was a duty-free franchisee, and we were like the distributor for Swatch watches as well. And coming to NUS, and I had to earn part-time, I was working part-time, whether is it teaching or whether is it working in a cafe, earning $4 an hour, which was unheard of now. So I felt that I had put myself through school, and I was very thankful at that point. I also met my current husband. So we've been together for 23 years, you know, and later on you'll see him in the slides. But the people that you surround yourself with. So I had a good bunch of girlfriends that I've met since I was 7 years old. We are still very close right now. Actually enabled me to find my calling or my purpose in life. So other than NUS, you know, because my mom knew that my grades were crap anyway, so she said, you know, girl, go and do whatever you want to see if you can hone your leadership skills. And so that was what I did. So in NUS, I was not staying in the hall, thank God. You know, my mom said, oh, thank God she didn't stay in the hall. She saw very, very little of me because at any time, like freshman orientation, I was juggling like 6 projects at one time. So I was literally not at home, right? You know, and therefore, you know, moving on to my next job, you know, after I graduated from NUS, I was very thankful I graduated on time. In year 2000, that's when the IT bubble burst. So it was after the 97 crisis, I was in school, year 2000, the IT bubble burst, and it was like in between, you know, when the Yahoo days, you know, and that first IT bubble, right? It was very difficult to look for a job, you know, and so back in the day, it wasn't that long ago, like 20 years ago, right? But when you graduated back in the time, you had to photocopy your resume. So I remembered, because of the situation that our family was in, I printed more than 100 copies of my resume to send out hard copy. You know, I don't know how much I spent on snail mail, but you know, you would buy those large brown envelopes and put your graduation cert inside in black and white, not even color copy, it was black and white. And then I mailed out to whatever jobs that I could find. And I was very lucky. I was offered a job at MediaCorp. So back in the day, it wasn't MediaCorp. It was still TCS and RCS. I was there at the turning point when MediaWorks was there. And they actually offered me a job, although I didn't study marketing at all. But this is another point where I was actually blessed with my first set of managers who actually taught me everything that I knew about advertising. So anything that you feel that I've done a good job in terms of branding, be it like for Food Bank or for my current company right now, was all thanks to my first set of managers. So I think whoever that comes your way guides you along into finding your target in your life, or in enabling you to find your strengths as well, like what actually are you good at. And so in my first job, I realized I was very good in marketing, although I didn't study it. I had lots of ideas, I was creative as well. And at this point, I was also at the peak of my eating disorder. So throughout my growing up years, coming back to that story, if you remember, I started this journey of being bulimic and sometimes anorexic at 11 years old. So I've spent more than 10 years of my life starving myself. So at my peak, I had 5 days without food. So yes, you can survive 5 days no food. I was surviving on water. And it was actually my colleagues in my first job that enabled me to seek help, because I was very open about talking about my problem. And back in the day, you know, none of the doctors knew what eating disorder really was all about. And I actually found my first calling when I managed to seek help at 22. I remembered. I quit my first job. I took a 2 months break, so to say, in search of myself. Because part of the problem with an eating disorder is that you're very much in the routine already. You know, you kind of lost yourself to the illness. So the doctors say the best thing that you can do for yourself right now is to take a break, because I've consistently been on the go. And so I took a break in search of myself, right? Sounds very close to the topic, right, for this talk. So I took 2 months off, you know, and it was for the first time that I focused on myself internally. Actually, who am I? What am I about? Am I just about being a good girl? Am I about living up to my parents' expectations? You know, what does it mean being a daughter? Being a female in the industry? Do I really have to be slim, tall, you know, like glamorous all the time? So what does it mean? And so I gave myself that break, and I left my first job. And the thing is that, so this is what I did. So my mom actually sign me up for her world, the most beautiful people or something like that, you know, like, so I was very surprised that I was shortlisted, you know, I was one of the 50 people. And in between taking a break, I basically did everything crazy, and that was the time when there was like, you know, live shows, you know, you follow someone. So there's Wong Lilin, if you want to know. So I actually joined this MediaCorp series where, you know, I went for 14 days to Australia, like testing out myself, and the camera crew was with me all the time to see, you know, how you can compete, you know, and we were supposed to be the last man standing, you know, at the end, and you get a very small prize, like it's not like $1 million or something. I think it was like $10,000 or $5,000. But I did everything to challenge myself and to test myself, because I gave myself that window of opportunity to search for something, to try for something. Because I know that the next job that I will get will likely be something that I'll be seriously crafting my career in. And so in between that, in 2002 came another crisis. That was 18 years ago. And SARS hit Singapore. I have to share this because obviously it's very close to all our hearts right now, right? But that was also the time when the whole F&B industry was trying to digitize themselves for the first time. And my dad said, hey, you know, I really need help in the business. So my dad, if you remember all the bankruptcy thing, so we lost everything. The only business that my dad could ring fence was my grandfather's business. And, you know, it was like a $5 million turnover, very small turnover compared to everything else. But it gave my uncles and my dad something to sustain and to continue. And as a company, we were already an old-timer in food distribution. So my dad said, hey, can you come back and help me to put computers in the business? And mind you, I'm an IT idiot till today. I really don't like IT. So, but I said, sure. Being very close to my family, I said, definitely, Dad, I will come back. So I quit, you know, traveling around and doing all this crazy stuff. And I came back to the family business. And I didn't look back since then. At this juncture, I need to really say that my uncle only gave me 1 year to survive in the trade, because it was a male-dominated industry. So I was working with a lot of business owners that are far older than I was. They're all male. Secondly, most of the executive chefs still today, they're also male. And so for the first time, Ng Chai Mong, Wang Zai Mao, as we call it, the food distribution business had our first salesperson, and that was me. And I was the youngest employee. Then I was here to learn. I wanted to make a change to the business. But before I get there, let me finish my personal story first. So that's my husband. Actually, in fact, tomorrow we're celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary. So we've been married for 10 years, but we've been together since 1997. And that itself is a story that would take like probably another 2 hours, but I won't use 2 hours for that. Till today, my husband is my greatest cheerleader. He is my soulmate. I would consider him my best male friend because I've got a best girlfriend. And we have honed our relationship through lots of ups and downs. Our relationship is not perfect at all. We went through a lot of hardships because he came from a background that's completely different. His family setup was also very, very different. But somehow when we decided to get married, and that was the time that I decided to sacrifice for my spouse, because I had to convert. So maybe not a lot of you know, but I told my husband, if we are to marry, it is only right and respectful of me to be able to embrace your religion as well. And so that's what I did. And that was 10 years ago. If you want to see, we had the most fabulous wedding ever. It was like 48 hours, 2 days, because we had to like both sides. So we had the full traditional Chinese wedding, you know, from the morning, you know, he came with all the Chinese ceremonial, tea ceremony, gate crashing and all that. Actually, in fact, he changed more outfits than I did because he's more vain than I am. But we had the full suite of things, you know, so both sides. And I would always remember there was a minister that came, you know, this reverend of sorts that helped us to have that civil marriage as well, where he said something very beautiful. He said, Nichol and Eddie, you have to remember that your marriage is basically a marriage of cultures. It's not even about the religion or about two people. It is about two different cultures coming together, and that's the most beautiful thing. And so we decided from that point on that we had to share our story, because it's not every day that people would really talk about it. Two very different people. I'm very patient. He's completely impatient. He's completely hot-tempered. He is the funny one. I'm the very serious one. And basically, I'm the mother of the family, and I've got 5 kids now, including him. So that's something that I always say. So this was at our wedding dinner, and the next day we had the whole Malay side of things. His mom was Indian, so I wore the sari as well. It was the most fun 48 hours we've ever had. And of course, with fun, of course we have to decide to have kids, right? So firstly, I would also like to declare that a lot of people have asked me, is it because your husband's side of the family has been forcing you to have so many kids? So let me make it very clear. My biggest purpose in life is to be a mother. And in fact, I wanted to have minimally 6. Okay, so I don't know if I'm on my track to getting 6, but I think I'm a little bit old for that. But my biggest dream was to have 6 children minimally. In fact, it was my husband who said that he doesn't like kids at all. So I had to brainwash him to be on this paternal journey. And but he has thanked me for that because he had the best Father's Day last weekend. I think our greatest calling in life, and we always say that the only legacy that we leave behind really is our children. So now I have 4, in case you want to know. My eldest is actually 7.5, and my youngest is actually 6 months. So let me show you. So we had, we now have 3 girls, 1 boy, and in between we lost 1 as well. But if not, I would be having 5 now. So I'm thinking, I should have 5, So instead, other than running so many businesses, 2 charities and all that, my biggest joy and my first role, other than being a wife, really is to be a mother. In fact, today I'm very tired because last night I only had 1 hour of sleep, which is 2 hours short of my usual quota. Because I do the night shift myself. My youngest is currently teething. She's already got 4 teeth at 6 months plus. But I really, really enjoy being a mom. So you would ask me, how does my youngest look like? So that's her in the high chair. She is a foodie by itself because, she loves her food, and I started feeding her solids at 4 months. But we have a beautiful family. And I say this from the bottom of my heart, despite having 3 hours of sleep. And imagine being someone with eating disorder. So now, every day, I start my day with a black cup of coffee. I only eat once a day and 3 hours of sleep. But between my entire company and maybe myself and my husband, I'm the Energizer Bunny. So I am like very, as Chinese would say, 省钱. I can save money a lot. I eat very little, I sleep very little, but I can generate a lot of energy. So that's something. If some of you are asking, like, how does she actually do it? So that's one of the tips. And now, just to end that part about eating disorder, one of the first things that I also did when I managed to seek help before I even go to the business was I decided early on when I was at my first support group for my eating disorder that I have to reach out to more people to talk about this eating disorder problem because it was so taboo, right? So one of my callings as well, in search of my purpose, one of the purpose that I have set out is I need to change people's impression of what eating disorder is all about. It's nothing taboo, it's nothing bad to talk about. In fact, the earlier you address it, the faster you get help. And so when I was so blessed to be able to find the doctor that helped me to be on track for my recovery, I said, I really need to help more people by setting up a support group. And back in the day, nobody really talks about eating disorder. Even till today, it's not something that you openly talk about. But I think being a modern female, even a modern male of today, and the pressures that we actually feel, eating disorder is something that many of us face, but it's just that we don't talk about it. And in fact, you might see a lot of successful women and men suffering from it because it's our way of controlling our life. So that was one of the first purpose that I set out to do. So I set up the support group for eating disorders when I was 21. And the next purpose that I actually called out for myself is how can I extend my grandfather's business beyond the 70 and 80 years? I wanted to continue the legacy of my grandfather, although I've never met him before, for another 100 years. So in order for me to do that, and because of all the past bankruptcy cases and everything else, I took a bold move. It was a very daring move because we were already an old and established name. I actually, in fact, we set up food services and we acquired the family business. So we are a third generation business with a very interesting story because we are like a startup, but in an 80-year-old body. That's always how we describe ourselves. And X Inc. is a group of companies that I actually manage together with my brother right now. So that's my grandfather on the left. I've never met him, but I heard plenty of stories about him. Very interesting gentleman. In case any of you are asking, so is Ng Chai Mong his name? So I'm sorry, but Ng Chai Mong is not his name. It's Wang Zai Mao, as 姓黄的在茂. So means that the Ngs are ever prosperous. So many people ask me that question, right? Is that your grandpa's name? It's not. And I'm very thankful that I'm able to continue my grandfather's dream and story from 1939 to where we are today, and having gone through so many different crises, right, including World War II and even COVID-19, for now, like how are we going to reinvent ourselves so that we can actually continue our business for another more 50 more years, 100 more years? What is the legacy that we are really going to we bought over the family business. So in 2008, my brother actually left his job in Tiger Beer and he joined me full-time. And it's been two of us ever since. So the other mission that I've set out is that I wanted to build a business with my sibling, whom I love to bits. And that's been one of the missions for between the two of us as well, to show people that actually family businesses, you can firstly thrive through 3 generations. In fact, I think we are thriving quite well beyond 3rd generation. I don't know about the 4th generation, still too young to consider, but at least at the 3rd generation, the two of us we've also shared with each other that, a lot of people out there that yes, actually siblings can work very well together, because one of the things that we've set out to do is my brother respects me as an older sister, but I respect him as the man that he is. So for his strengths, and I don't just see him as a younger brother. In fact, we are equals in the business. So what we did was, this is our group of companies right now. So other than serving more than 5,000 over F&B establishments, from like Shake Shack and Privé to your Ba Chor Mee store, likely we are there with a few thousand products. We also serve all the supermarkets and all the e-commerce as well, like Red Mart. We have our own delivery fleet, so we manage a fleet of more than 30 over vehicles, 100 over people in warehousing and delivery. We also run our own building. So in December this year, it was a bittersweet moment because I just gave birth to my number 4 in November, and then end of November, and then middle of December I moved into our new building, a brand new building where we rebuilt from scratch. It was a bittersweet moment because during my dad's bankruptcy case, we actually lost our building. Yeah, due to all the bad things that happened. So going back to a building that you own was kind of surreal, and I felt that it was a turning point. On just to continue my dad's story as well. And the other thing, if you didn't know, we also run a agricultural business. So Plots is our holding company for our businesses in China. We have a tea plantation and a chestnut plantation. So when I say food is in my veins, it's also from the soil that we own. It is a very interesting business. I wouldn't encourage everybody to get into agriculture because it's not easy, but food really extends completely, to what we do. In our new building, we actually help the F&B industry to change, to revolutionize. It's not just about digitization, but can we help them to make their businesses better? So when our business partners evolve their business, right, we also will get more business. So that's something that we've taken on, And of course, importantly, and I'm coming to the last few slides already, which is why I'm called here today, because Mayo was quite intrigued to why I actually set up the food bank, right? So one of the values that we've had is, while we are very modern on the outside, if you see our company logo, look so sleek, our trucks are all black color, but one thing was key. We wanted to maintain the values that we've always had, regardless the name of the company. So it doesn't matter that we're not Wang Zai Mao anymore, but we retained the philosophies that our grandfather handed down to us, which is always to put a thought into everything that you do, whether is it for your employees, whether is it for the greater society, or whether is it for the industry that you're working in. So Si, which means thought in Chinese, right, became the value that we maintain even in the group of companies that we have now. And having that thought, we decided to start a food bank. I have to say at this juncture, the food bank nearly didn't start because the first obstacle that we had was we tried to register the name with ACRA, and the officer at the other end was saying, Singapore, there's no more banking license. This is a real story, I'm not kidding. So in 2012, when I was expecting my first child, we were struggling to get the name. So if we didn't push through the Food Bank Singapore in terms of registration, we would have been called the Sunshine Gang or something, still being in food banking, but that was the first obstacle. And the two of us, me and my brother, were always questioned like, hey, you love each other so much that even you want to set up a charity together, don't you spend enough time together already? So I think in previous lives we may have been husband and wife or something, but we really enjoyed the momentum working as siblings. And the food bank has basically solidified our partnership even further because now we have something non-profitable that we are striving for together. And it started as a tiny dream, just the two of us wanting to come together because Singapore throws away more than 30% of everything that we import. And it's really a shame because we import up to 90% of everything that we consume. We are one of the most affluent cities in the entire world. We're one of the highest per capita income. There must be something that we can do with all this excess food, right? That's on one side. And then the other side is that we definitely know that there are hungry people in Singapore. There's food insecurity, although there's no minimum wage, there's no poverty line. Being a first world country, this is something that I have to mention. We need to look at it. And so we thought, let's start with something that we're very comfortable with, which is food. And so paired with the exposure to One Singapore as well, and knowing what they do, and I didn't found that organization, but being the president, I said, okay, so there are poverty issues. Are we able to actually do something about food as well? And so when we started the food bank, it was a tiny dream of Nicholas and myself coming out to say that first world country, we should have our own food bank. And in the first year, we actually redistributed 2 tons of food. And last year, we redistributed 802 tons of food. And we have a small team of 6 full-time staff. Don't tell me how we do it and don't ask me how we did it. But I must say it is the best decision of our lives to be able to start a food bank in Singapore. And it's not just because we can help fellow Singaporeans or the people who reside in this tiny island, but we genuinely feel that there is also a calling for food bank in Singapore to do something for the greater region, because there are no food banks around the region in Philippines, Indonesia, an accredited food bank over there. So we thought if we get rid of food insecurity in Singapore, our next mission is to help our neighbours and to help the other countries in need as well. And I think we're on track to that. So now we have 360 charity organizations. And in fact, during COVID-19, we even took on quite a relatively special role because we had the white label. We were part of the essential business. When family service centres had to close, we were allowed to open and operate. So we actually took on the task on feeding door to door as well. We've never done that before because the nature of our business was to be a redistributor of excess food. So we actually helped other charities to feed the people on the ground. But when the circuit breaker hit and COVID-19 hit, we had to take on the role to go door to door as well. And remember, we only had 6 full-time staff. And at the peak of our feeding, we were actually redistributing or feeding 13,000 meals a day, door to door. It was a feat that we asked ourselves, how do we do it? So in a short span of 7 weeks, we actually redistributed, together with emergency food bundles, 502 tons of food. It's amazing in that short span of time, but one thing that really worries me at this juncture is what is the fabric of Singapore going to look like after COVID-19, the unemployment and all that. And the first thing, if people come to you saying that they are hungry, and we are so lucky to be living in Singapore because you can still get a hot meal at $3. I'm not asking you to go to MBS to eat or something, but if you go to a neighborhood, you can still get your wonton mee, your nasi lemak at $3 and $3.50. You try to get that in the US or in Europe, maybe a washed down coffee meal at $3. Why is it there are still people who cannot afford to feed themselves? And so we've set ourselves on a mission that our target right now is to get rid of food insecurity in Singapore by 2025. So we are now on track to putting ourselves out of business. But COVID-19 obviously threw a spanner in the works. But we are still on track to understanding a lot more needs on the ground. That actually led me to creating the purpose that I have for my life, which is how do we help the greater population? How do we really get rid of the problem on the ground so that all of us can lead more fulfilling lives as well? And so we've started the mission with the food bank. I don't think this is I think this is just one of the charities that I'll be hitting at some point. And so, in fact, the last slide here is really what's in my story, other than having a 5th child, perhaps, what's the next chapter in my life? I really don't know. I'm still evaluating that, but for sure, I think the next 50 years that I will be having is going to be quite exciting. Yeah. Thank you.